Doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I was going to get you to state your name and your position.
Sounds good. I am Patrick Hollahan. I am the pastor of Lake Murray Evangelical Church in Chapin, South Carolina. I've been pastor there. I've been on staff there since 2010. I came on as the associate pastor in 2010, and when the senior pastor retired in 2012, I have been the senior pastor there ever since.
Pastor, I got a couple questions I was going to ask you, kind of how you would deal with stuff in your leadership.
Sounds great.
Start off with how would you deal with a church member or say a person in leadership that say board member, deacon, or elder that didn't agree with the vision that God had given you?
That's a great question, and the answer is hopefully, hopefully I would um, be okay with it. And what I mean by that is that's part of why I'm so big on having an elder-led church, being a part of an elder-led church, um, because it's a community. It's not one person. If it's something that God has really put, it's a really a vision that's been brought to me by God. It's going to be confirmed by others. There's no such thing as a vision that's being brought to you by God that no one else agrees with, especially no one else in the family of believers, no one else who is being led by the Holy Spirit. If people can hear, I really believe God's doing this, He wants us to do this, and everyone else is like, yeah, I don't see it. Um, I'd like to think that I would be okay. Maybe I was just misinterpreting something, um, but yeah, I would like to think that would be pretty good about saying, yeah, all right, well, that's not clearly not what God wants. If we're having issues now, if it's just like one person, then yes, then we have discussions. If it's just one person who's come along and say, I don't see this, I don't agree with it, I'm not. Well, we talk about it. Again, that's where having a connected board of elders works, because when you can do that, you can have discussion, you can talk about it, you can work through what's happening. And if there really is, at the end of the day, some real serious disagreement, we'll usually table things. We at LMEC, it's an unwritten rule. It's not a written rule. It's not in our policies anywhere. We can vote on things and have non-unanimous votes from the other. We generally don't push forward with things unless we have a unanimous vote. Unless it's something that has to be done. It's a today thing, and one way or the other, we got to answer a question. And if there's one holdout, we might still move. We might still move with it. But it's sort of an unwritten rule that if there's even one holdout on our elder board for something, we usually wait until we can say with unanimity, this is where God is taking us. This is where God's leading us. And I think it's really worked for us in the past. And I appreciate that that's sort of the sentiment that we have because of it. So, yeah.
Well, that was one of the I wanted to ask that question because I've seen that come up time and time again with
Oh, yes.
different not just churches but also in different spiritual leadership
That's right.
positions where they didn't agree. And I just want to get your take on how you would handle it.
Oh, yeah. That's very good. Yeah. Yeah.
So my next question would be, how would you handle, say, a person under you in the leadership, say a praise and worship leader or someone in the church that's doing something that maybe is you notice is not living right or doesn't or needs to be removed from that position? How would you handle that situation?
Yeah, that's a tough one. But the reality is, if someone's doing something wrong and it needs to be addressed, then it needs to be addressed. Um, the fact of the matter is, depends on what the position is, obviously, and what type of ministry is being performed. Sometimes they need to get out right away because they're either out in front and they're leading people the wrong way, or they're bringing out something that's not good at, especially if their sin is somewhat public. Other people, you can just sort of read the situation. If a certain sin isn't specifically affecting what they're doing, I can get back with them and start just work through some accountability measures without having to remove them from the position. So I know that sounds vague and it's somewhat generalized and it's not really specific, but that is kind of the answer. There isn't a specific answer. You have to deal with whatever sin is happening and what the ministry position is, but one way or the other, it has to be addressed. Um, if sin is known about, especially if if there's some question to it, yeah, you have to deal with it. You have to at least address it. Go and say, "Hey, what's going on? Talk to me." And yeah, it's got to be dealt with at least on a personal. What's going on? How do we address it? And then we can deal with what disciplinary action needs to be taken, if any needs to be taken.
And on this question, I ask it because I know a lot of in today's society and church, it seems that a lot of leaders don't want to deal with the sin. They just want to ignore it and move on,
Look,
which
no one wants to. Let's be fair. No one wants to, right? That is it is maybe the least comfortable thing. And the reason why no one wants to is because everyone can say, "Hey, look, I got my own sin. I got issue areas where I'm working on, where I'm struggling, I'm fighting through." And so there's almost that measure of hypocrisy. You feel like, well, if I address this and I deal with it, and I force them to have to do something about it. Well, what am I doing about the sin in my own life? And sometimes it's just, or it's, but and people are going to get really upset. They might get hurt about this. In the end, dealing with sin and not letting it remain late is going to be a much healthier thing for your church in the long run than what hurt feelings might come about in the initial. So it's hard and it's not easy. I don't want to sound like I'm this. Oh yeah, we got to. I have to sort of force myself. I have to say, okay, this is going to be an
I
uncomfortable
understand
conversation,
that.
And so it's not easy, and it's not one that I'm just naturally inclined to do either. But yeah, it's got to be done.
Yeah. Well, I got one more question for you.
Okay.
How do you, as a leader, handle, and especially as a pastor, handle maybe the stress of sometimes you get a lot of stress in ministry,
Yeah.
and how do you deal with that when you go home? Does it affecting you at home?
Unfortunately, yes, it does. And it's tough because the effects of it at home often are tired. I often have a shorter temper with my family than I might with other people. Um, and it's clear. It's pretty obvious. I, I'm I'm having to work on patience and work on grace and work on recognizing where people are struggling and hurting and that it's easy to build up. And so it's a reminder that I've got to get reminded of a lot. And unfortunately, it's my wife who has to remind me of these things because I take it out a lot of things out on her too. Got to be reminded that look, my family needs me to be able to have patience with them too. My family needs me to be able to deal with them, and I have to remember that this isn't. It's not where it feels like it's sort of that's my outlet. This is supposed to be their safe haven, and that's the reminder we need. So the long answer of how do you deal with it? Well, you got to find ways to relax. You got to find ways to sort of because of being a being in a pastoral situation is a 24/7 mental job. Mentally, you're always there. You don't stop being a pastor, and you don't stop thinking about what it means to be a pastor. And there's always there's always a prayer request. There's always something, and there's always someone hurting. There's always someone you're needing to help. And if you don't have a way to just chill out and you're going to blow up. And unfortunately, those blow ups usually come around the people who need you to least blow up near them, your kids, your wife. So, um, yeah, I mean, find ways to get your feet up, find
I,
ways to relax.
I ask you that question because it kind of hit home with me too. Because I grew up in my dad has
Yep,
been a pastor most of my life, and me being called in the ministry too. I have heard the one phrase with kids and wives. I don't, you come home, and a lot of times I don't think people outside understand that question
that's right.
or that how much it affects their family.
That's right. It's they my family sees a lot different side of you than the church does, and it's not because I'm hiding anything. It's all it. Sometimes it feels that way, but I actually think that it's not who I that the person who I really am is the person around my church. That's who at least it's who I want to be. Um, and sometimes it's the person who I don't really want to be is the person that gets let out around my family. And so I know that that's a tough thing for them, and it's not the real me. It's the stressed out. I don't have any other way of venting with me, and they get the brunt of things sometimes when I'm lacking patience. They get the brunt of things when I'm stressed. They get the brunt of things when I've had a hard day. Um, yeah, and it's not okay. It's not good, and that's why it needs to be dealt with. It can't just be something where you had a difficult day, suck it up and move on. You had a difficult day. You've had
Yeah.
to deal with some things that are hard. Find a way to get the best way. Let me just stop myself because I've been trying to come up with I've been trying to say things that are real, but that the fact of the matter is the most real answer to this is going to be the most cliched answer, but it's also the most real answer. The most real answer is to find a spot where you can get, especially when you're frustrated, especially when you're stressed, especially when you're just so worn out from having to deal with stuff. Find a spot that you know you can go to and just pray for a little bit. Prayer really does change your outlook. It changes the way you can. It allows you to have a chance to calm down, but it's also that moment where you get to be with God. He's okay with us venting. He's not going to be overwhelmed with our vents. He's not going to be overwhelmed with what does things. So that that's really the best answer. Yes, finding a quiet, dark place to sit up, put your feet up, works. Prayer works better. It really does.
Well, Pastor, I appreciate you answering these questions for me.
Absolutely.
I'm going to end our interview here. And if you don't mind, stay online for a minute.
That's fine.